Recent research has shown that to make these Chola bronzes, where did they get the copper from? And they probably got it from Sri Lanka, which is why there was a great war always being fought between the Chola kings and the kings of Sri Lanka, because they wanted to control the copper mines. It's an important thing to remember that copper and Tamrapadni is the name, or the copper island was given to Sri Lanka is the name to be remembered. So materials play a very important role. We have to ask the question, where did gold come from? Where did silver come from? Where did copper come from?
Visual art has many forms. So when you look around, you find buildings, monuments, paintings. There's one important element of art or visual art which actually stands out and catches everybody's attention. We're talking about sculptures. Hello everyone, I am Manas Srivastava and you're watching Art and Culture with Devdutt Pattanaik. And in this episode of Season 2, we are going to talk about sculptures with Devdutt and try to understand their cultural significance. So welcome Devdutt. So Devdutt, in the previous episodes of this season, we talked about architecture in detail from the perspective of history and their cultural importance, their importance from the point of view of art and culture. You hinted in our last episode through your point to ponder that we are going to talk about sculptures today. But a lot of students or a lot of people do not know the difference between architecture and sculpture. Sometimes it is believed that it's a part of architecture, and a lot of people think that they are very different from architecture. So if you can briefly throw some light on what is the difference between architecture and sculpture to begin with.
There are very basic differences. Architecture deals with dwelling spaces, usually homes, cityscapes, temples, mosques, monuments of kings, tombs. So there is a dwelling. People go and stay within it. It has a functional utility. Sculptures are more aesthetic. They do not have a functional purpose, and they're certainly not for dwelling. So you can have architecture with sculpture. You can have architecture without sculpture. You have sculpture without architecture. Sculptures are not necessary. They may have ritual use, they may have aesthetic use, but they're not dwelling or functional spaces. So keywords are they dwelling? Dwelling word is a good word to remember, and functional, aesthetic. These are the words I would use when I'm trying to explain the difference.
Thank you, Devdutt, for telling us the difference. Please, students, note these two important keywords, the dwellings and function. Now, for the next question, I would first request all the viewers and students, aspirants, to have a atlas, a map book in front of you. And the second thing is the historical timeline chart. Okay, because the question which I'm going to ask Devdutt is if Devdutt, you can tell us, the genesis and help us to understand historically the development of sculptural art in India.
We have to go look at history and geography. From a historical point of view, prehistoric sculptures, we don't have many images in India that are remarkable or worth discussing. Sculptures, the most ancient sculpture that we have comes from the Harappan civilization or the Indus civilization. We have the famous clay figurines found in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and these are usually female forms, bejeweled women, tiny clay forms, perhaps of ritual use. Then we have this dancing girl image, again a 10 centimeter tall image. It's not really a dancing girl. It's the name given by archaeologists. Always remember that. Archaeologists thought that she had the stance of a dancing girl, and they called it a dancing girl image. It's made by the lost wax technique, and it's made of metal and shows that this is a chalcolithic culture. That is, they use copper. Then there is the soft stone carvings that you find. You found statues in Dholavira. There is a statue. We have found it also in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. These statues are like, this is the so-called priest king. You can see there is an ornament on his head. You can see that he has got a shawl over his right shoulder, very much the way we wear shawls today. And then there is this typical three-leaf pattern or three-clover pattern, which is found indicating some connections with Mesopotamia. After that, for 1,000 years, that means from 1900 BC to about 300 BC, we have no sculptures in India. And then during the Mauryan period, sculptures re-emerge, and you find the imperial structures, so royal structures. Royal sculptures are being built, usually on top of pillars. And for example, you have this famous lion's image, and you can see this is a sculpture. It is not functional. It is a aesthetic and a royal symbol designed to proclaim the majesty of the king. You can see the Dharma Chakra below that. You can see the images of the horse, the bull, the elephant below that. So that is the kind of sculptures that you find in the Mauryan period. A little bit after the Mauryan period, you start finding sculptures as bas relief. Bas reliefs means shallow carvings, very shallow, they're not very deep. On the railings of Bharhut and Sanchi. And for example, this is the famous Lakshmi sculpture. But this Lakshmi is the Buddhist Lakshmi. For those who are interested, Hindu Lakshmis would have 4 arms. So multiple arms indicate a Hindu deity, and 2 arms indicates it is from the Buddhist world. Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, was celebrated by merchants across Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, and her first image is found in Bharhut and Sanchi on the railings as bas sculptures. So that's a point to remember. Then you jumped from this period. This is Bharhut sculpture, is roughly 100 BC. It is at the time the Scythians were ruling in the western part of India, but the statues found in central India, Bharhut, Sanchi, are near the city of Bhopal, north of the Narmada, north of the Vindhyas in Madhya Pradesh. So this is the region where you find these stupas. Then you have the Gandhara art. Now, Gandhara art starts a little bit after the Kushana period. And in the after the Kushan, so Scythians are 100 BC. This is the way I remember it. And 100 AD for me is where the Kushans are there. And post that, you have this Gandhara art flourishing in the Gandhara region. Now, where is Gandhara? It is currently in Pakistan. So the river Jhelum separates Gandhara from Kashmir. That's how you remember it. So in the north, if you see Kashmir, there's a Jhelum river. So the early period, it is mostly in Gandhara. So it is towards the west of the Jhelum. And around 700, 800 AD, you have Kashmir becoming prominent. And that is the Kashmir region. But right now we're in the Gandhara, and you find the Buddhist art only, made of grey shits or sandstone. And it's the statues are of Buddha. For the first time, the images of Buddha are appearing. You can see these fabrics are draped in a very Greco-Roman fashion, indicating Greek influence. Around 300 AD, it is believed that many sculptures ran away from the Roman Empire and came towards India because they were being persecuted by the newly converted Christian emperor and his military. It was becoming more and more a Christian empire from a Roman empire, and the people who made statues of gods and goddesses obviously were being persecuted, and they were moving towards the east, and many of them would have come to the Gandhara region. Therefore, these statues look very like Greek gods. You can see the Greek god image. You can see the halo behind Buddha. You can see the Buddha looks like a Greek hero. The drapes are very important. That's the important thing that you remember when you talk about Gandhara art. Around the same time as Gandhara art, which is near Jhelum River, west of the river Jhelum, Swat Valley, northwest part of Pakistan, in the Indian side, that is Mathura, near the river Yamuna, you have the Mathura art emerging using red sandstone. So white sandstone is there in Gandhara, red sandstone is in India. You have the images of the Buddha. You can see more body being shown, less drapes being shown. The Gandhara art, the whole body is covered. Both the shoulders are covered. In the Mathura art, one shoulder is covered, reminding you a little bit of the Harappan period, but that connection is not important. You see the bodies are more fuller. It's called prana, as if wind is blowing from within, that they are alive, and this kind of the body is full. This is a characteristic feature of Mathura art and all Indian art, where the bodies are always shown full, as if there is air blowing from inside towards the outside, almost like a balloon, one can say. And this feeling of life is very important in the Mathura art. Now, what is unique about Mathura art is not just the red sandstone, the material used, but there is also, for the first time, Buddhist, Jain and Hindu artwork. So there is the Buddhist, of course, the Buddha images are there. The earliest Buddha images, there's a controversy whether it first human-looking Buddha image appeared in Gandhara or Mathura. Nobody's going to ask you that question because it's still controversial. Historians are debating about it. Some say it is in Gandhara, some say it is in Mathura. Now, as I said, you find the Jain images in Mathura's Kankalatila, and Kankalitila, the Jain images are important because the earliest Saraswati statue is found amongst them. This is the earliest Saraswati statue. The earliest Lakshmi statue was found in the Buddhist stupas around 100 BC, and around 100 AD, 200 AD, Mathura region, you find the earliest Saraswati image. You also find the earliest Hindu images. These are images of the early form of Krishna, which is a four-armed Krishna, where he's holding Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. In this time, he was not known as Vishnu, it was known as Vasudeva, and there is the Vrishni brothers, images of Krishna, Balarama, his son Pradyumna, his grandson Aniruddha. These images are appearing in the Mathura region. After this, you have to go further south. So remember, we moved Gandhara, which was near Jhelum river. Then we came to Mathura, which is near Yamuna. And from Mathura region, we will now go down the Godavari and the Krishna to the delta of Krishna. And there we find the Amravati region, Nagarjuna Konda region, and the Amravati Stupa. Here the material used, again, it's a Buddhist site. And again, it is the material, you see the ornamentation over here. You are finding this extreme ornamentation in the southern part of India. So this is the earliest southern stupas in the rich agricultural deltas of the Krishna, mostly around the Krishna delta, a little bit around the Godavari delta too, which is in Andhra Pradesh, coastal Andhra. This is a very important region. If you go upstream to Krishna river in Karnataka, there's a Kanakahalli stupa also there. So the Buddhist sites are where the sculptures are first appearing. The material used is limestone, white. It's not marble, it's marble-like, but it's milestone. And again, you can see the bas relief, that is shallow carvings from the lives of the Buddha, Jataka tales, and of course this is the image of the famous Amravati stupa, which was supposed to be very tall and this ornate thing. One thing to remember is that Nagarjuna Konda had many of these sites which was shifted during the building of the Nagarjuna Konda Dam and has been shifted to an island there. So it's an important thing to remember. If you remember, in Egypt, the Karnak statues had to be moved to make way for the Aswan Dam. Similar thing happened in India too, and a major archaeological site had to be shifted to an island in Nagarjuna Konda. Just a general knowledge to remember. After this period, so this is, we were talking about 300 AD, we jump now another 300-400 years and we come to the Chalukya period. In the Deccan region, we find sculptures being built, Hindu sculptures being built. Hindu sculptures, typically 500 AD is a good marking point to remember. This is when Aihole, Badami, Pattadakal in Karnataka. It is when Ellora and Ajanta carvings are being made. The sculptures are appearing in these Deccan regions. You can see this is the a three-dimensional image coming out of, so not a bas relief, but it's almost three-dimensional coming out of the rock that you find in Karnataka, in Maharashtra, as I said, in Ellora, and you find it in Aihole and Badami. And this is, you find Shiva images, you find Vishnu images. That means the Hindu imagery has come. And these are basalt and granite statues built into the rock caves. So temples have not yet started. Gradually, when the temples start, of course, after 800 AD, the freestanding temples start to emerge in Karnataka, in Odisha, in North India, in South India. You find these sculptures on top of temples. So remember, architecture is the temple, and on top of that, there are sculptures. This is from Odisha that you can see this sculpture. After these stone statues, you suddenly, around the 10th century, the Chola period. So a history, we always move from the Mauryan period, then the Satavahans, Gupta period. After the Gupta period, you come to the Chalukyas, the famous Chalukyas, and the Rashtrakutas, after which, see, I always remember Chalukyas, and then Cholas, which is 10th century. Chalukyas is around 7th, 8th century, 8th century is Rashtrakuta, Chalukya, then Rashtrakuta, and then Cholas. And the Chola period is where in Tamil Nadu you find the famous bronze Nataraja, these gigantic statues which are mobile statues. So in the temples there were stone statues which were fixed, and there were mobile statues made up of bronze. Now bronze requires a lot of copper and alloy. So panchadhatu, this word in India would be, the alloy is panchadhatu, tridhatu, saptadhatu. So different dhatus are mixed alloys, and they make these statues, again using the lost wax technique. Now, the bronze, one of the important things to remember is the recent research has shown that to make these Chola bronzes, where did they get the copper from? And they probably got it from Sri Lanka, which is why there was a great war always being fought between the Chola kings and the kings of Sri Lanka, because they wanted to control the copper mines. It's an important thing to remember that copper, and Tamrapadni is the name, or the copper island was given to Sri Lanka is the name to be remembered. So materials play a very important role. We have to ask the question, where did gold come from? Where did silver come from? Where did copper come from? Gold came from Tibet. Gold came from Southeast Asia, that's for Swarna Bhumi. Copper came, so Tambra word is used, from Sri Lanka. And that plays an important role in the making of these sculptures from Chola.
Thank you, Devdutt, for that answer. And it reminds me something very important from season 1. I remember when we were doing season 1, Devdutt, you mentioned about time and space. And you said that it's very important to understand any topic of art and culture through this concept of time and space. Now, when you were explaining this, and this is very important for students to note, that both geography and history go hand in hand, especially hand in hand when you are understanding culture. So that's why I said that the map book has to be open and the historical timeline chart should be there in front of your eyes. So it helps us to understand topics, in a better way. For example, sculpture, कि किस एरिया की हम बात कर रहे हैं, उसका मटेरियल जो बनाने वाला है वो कहाँ से आ रहा है, what is the dominant theme in that sculptural art related to that region and that historical period. This is called connecting the dots, and this concept of time and space will help you understand it in a better manner. Now, Devdutt, let's come to another question, and it's an important question because when we're talking about sculptural art and examples, we are also focusing mostly on dynasties, on these empires, bigger empires, bigger dynasties, which we see in our textbooks also, in history textbooks also. What about the sculptural art beyond these dynasties, beyond these historical empires? Can you please throw some light on this aspect?
There are a lot of folk sculptures. You should never forget that the tribal communities, the local communities they would use clay, and they would sometimes burnt clay, sometimes river clay, sometimes they would bake, sometimes unbaked. This clay would be used to make idols, like the images like the terracotta horses, the famous terracotta horses, like the Bankura horses of Bengal. Across India, folk shrines, you will see a lot of sculptures of horses and elephants being given to local gods. And these are called votive offerings. So these are the Bankura horses which were given to local Dharma Thakur of Bengal. You don't have to remember this, but remember these votive islands. And even today in Hindu rituals, for example, during the Ganpati Puja of Maharashtra, during Durga Puja, clay statues are used and they worship these statues. And after, nowadays, of course, we use plaster of Paris, which doesn't dissolve. But traditionally, it would have been river clay sculpture that you would pray to. And after praying, you will dissolve it in the water and there is no trace of it left. Which is perhaps why many parts, histories of India, you don't find any sculptures because perhaps they used clay images, and because they use clay images, these would dissolve in the rain, in the water, and would not last. Sometimes they would use cow dung to make these images. Even now, if you go to a village fair, you will find sculptures and toys made of cow dung, straw mixed together with a little clay and painted beautifully. So sculptures tell you a lot about Indian culture, and it is an important topic for UPSC.
Thank you, Devdutt, for answering this question, because whenever we are studying art and culture, or history for that matter, we focus on these bigger dynasties and empires and try to look and link the cultural traditions to these empires. But then, for example, here in sculptures, we have to look beyond these empires and dynasties, look into the folk traditions and folk art. So it is very important, and I'm sure students would realize that their studies, their preparation have to include these aspects too. So that's all for today, and we'll come back in the next week. In the next week, we are going to talk about another important topic, and that is coins. Okay, so till then, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Also, go and watch various videos, various informative videos at the Indian Express's YouTube channel. Follow our UPSC initiatives at indianexpress.com. Please subscribe for the UPSC Essentials magazine. Do write to me at manas.srivastava@indianexpress.com. Till then, think smart, work hard, conquer your goal. Bye-bye.